The number of attendees seems to have plateaued. Looks like we are at critical mass. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and turn it on over to our executive director to kick off our webinar. Bill?
Hey everyone, I want to welcome everyone to the Broadband Acceleration Grant Bag 6 Kickoff Webinar. We're excited to launch another program to bring broadband to communities that are unserved. We look forward to improving broadband service cost and quality in Kansas. Before we start all the slides, I want to cover a few administrative items. We have a lot to get through today in order to communicate all the information to you in a reasonable time frame, and also to be respectful of everyone's time. We're going to ask everyone to submit your questions through the chat session in the meeting application. We'll pause at the end of the middle mile section for about 5 minutes to answer some questions about infrastructure and middle mile, and then do another question section at the end of the presentation. We may not be able to answer all your questions during the 2 Q&A sessions, but we'll commit to answering your questions soon, in several days, potentially. Again, thank you for joining us for the BAG program kickoff webinar. We're so excited to see the interest. Next slide, please. There are 3 sub-programs with a BAG 6.0 that we'll cover today: last mile, line extensions, and middle mile, all of which play a significant role in achieving our broadband goals within the state. Next slide, please. Let's start with a review of the program. Next slide, please. The BAG program will provide up to $16.3 million in grant funding across 3 sub-programs. The last mile, line extension programs are focusing on enabling user locations with at least 100 over 20 megabit service. The middle mile program is focused on reducing overall middle mile costs and improving resiliency, while enabling rural last mile connections that must provide 10G transport. Joe, going to give it back to you for a quick overview of the BAG 6 program and how it compares to our past BAG programs. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Bill. All of our other programs have a $2 million per request cap. The last mile broadband infrastructure component has a very similar guidelines to our previous BAG 5 program that we wrapped up just a few months ago. The line extension component is restricted to extensions of existing fiber of HFC cable networks that are less than 1 mile from the end user. The middle mile program must deliver 10 gig service with less than 100 millisecond latency. There is a 50% required match for all of these programs as statutorily required. Next slide, please. RDOF areas that have been defaulted or have missed their milestone deadlines will be available for award. BEAD provisionally awarded locations and those locations included in a previous state award are not eligible. We will be utilizing the FCC's BSL data for service locations for both the last mile and line extensions. We look at the total benefit derived from each of the program's applications and make a final determination on how to allocate those funds. Next slide, please. Moving on to the timeline and eligibility criteria. Next slide, please. The portal is open. As of today, it will open here later after this webinar, and it will close on June 12th. Public comments will be accepted starting June 15th, with rebuttals being accepted until June 29th. If your application is accepted for an interview, that will happen approximately around August 31st. We hope to have awards on or after September 29th, with contracts executed by October 7th. Next slide, please. Eligible applicants for all of the sub-programs are the same: units of government and tribal governments, private entities, nonprofits, electrical utilities, ISPs, and cooperatives. Next slide, please. This program is for infrastructure construction and related broadband service. We will not be accepting applications for Wi-Fi hotspots, digital literacy, or equipment distribution programs, etc. And there are some examples on the screen here as well. Next slide, please. Our next set of slides will focus on the required financial information. Next slide, please. The applicant match is pretty straightforward for BAG 6. It's a 50% match for the applicant with the option of providing a higher match at the applicant's discretion. Slide, please.
I think we need to go back one
I think we
slide.
need to go back a slide. We should be at applicant match. There you go. Thank you. Nope, one more. There you go. Applicant match. Yes, thank you. The co-investment is set at $1, but applications with a greater co-investments will receive extra consideration in the scoring. The co-investment can come from a variety of different sources, including local and county governments, local economic development organizations, outside investors, to name a few. The co-investment can be used to offset up to 50% of the required match. Next slide, please. In-kind match is permitted for up to 99% of the required 50% match. The in-kind must be presented with a valuation that KOBD will have to review and approve. It can be any items necessary for the project and can include pre-application design costs. Federally funded assets may also be allowable depending on the source. Applicants will want to verify that source to make sure it's allowable for use. KOBD has created an in-kind match guidance document that is linked to our website. This goes into detail on how and what in-kind match will be treated. Next slide, please. Co-investment of at least $1 is required. Co-investment is a scored category, so we encourage you to try to obtain partners for your application. Co-investment can come from virtually any outside source, including local and county governments, state programs, economic development groups, outside investors. Any co-investment received can be used to meet the match requirement. Next slide, please. This slide lists the eligible costs within the construction, equipment, supplies, and materials categories. Please note that the costs incurred on or after April 27th are eligible for reimbursement should a grant be awarded. This will hopefully provide flexibility to those who have been gearing up for programs such as this one. Next slide, please. Ineligible costs range across obligation and debt servicing, administrative operational expenses, and capital assets and infrastructure items. These are pretty straightforward and consistent with our past programs. I did want to highlight that pre-construction planning, design, or pre-construction engineering associated within the project is eligible, but only as an in-kind match. Next slide, please. For ineligible telecom items, we're clearly focused on specific items prohibited in the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act pertaining to certain telecommunication services and equipment. I will note that this applies to both grant recipients and subcontractors, as well as the match dollars. Next slide, please. The funding priorities for Bag 6 include effort to meet the critical broadband needs of a community or rural area. These are areas that lack affordable and reliable broadband. As we make awards, we may distribute awards geographically to ensure that all regions of Kansas can participate. We're also focused on distressed counties that are unserved. Next slide, please. 53 counties are included in this category. We've combined both the American Community Survey 5-year per capita money income and the Bureau of Economic Analysis per capita personal income metrics, so that if either one of those metrics for a county is below 80% threshold, they are classified as an economically distressed county. The PCMI is seen as less accurate and reliable than data from administration records, but is generally accepted set of data. PCPI is much more complete metric because it includes more cash sources of income to accurately reflect per capita income. As a result, we'll be using both. Applications for locations in these areas will receive appropriate consideration in the project scoring. Next, Josh will provide some information on the last mile and line extension program. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Joe. This program is broken into 3 project categories. Next slide, please. Starting with the first 2, last mile and line extension. Next slide, please. The project goals are as follows. 1, address a critical broadband need for the community to be served. 2, provide broadband service to unserved locations within the proposed service area. 3, enable access to affordable and reliable high-speed broadband connection. And 4, provide a minimum of 100 by 20 megabits per second speed to the end user with scalability to at least symmetrical 10 gigabits per second. Next slide, please. The program includes affordability goals. We are targeting service for 100 by 20 megabits per second being provided at approximately $60 per month. While this is not required, we encourage awardees to offer this price for 3 years, and you'll be asked about it as part of the interview required for the award. Next slide, please. The guidelines for Bag 6 programs were largely based on the Bag 5 program. Some items worth mentioning are as follows. The qualifying speeds are 100 by 20. Priority considerations for regional award distribution. RDOF areas may be eligible. Fiber is preferred technology, but we will consider other technologies. Grant award maximum per single application is $2 million. The minimum unserved threshold is 100%. Middle mile is eligible as part of the last mile project when it's necessary to connect the last mile network. And the use of the FCC BDC fabric and service availability data is required. Next slide, please. The guidelines for the line extension program are similar to the last mile program, with the exception of the ineligibility of middle mile. We're extending existing lines. Middle mile should not be required. Next slide, please. Eligible areas for consideration will focus on the following. Unserved areas. Unserved is defined as those lacking 100 by 20 megabits per second service. It is focused on the 100% unserved threshold, where all locations must be shown to be unserved using the BDC data. It must show a critical need for the community being proposed. And worth noting, middle mile is not allowed for line extensions, as there should already be infrastructure available. Middle mile is allowable for last mile projects. Next slide, please. Any location in a project that is receiving funding for broadband expansion from another grant program run by the state or federal government is generally ineligible. There are exceptions for certain RDOF or CAF2 locations. Next slide, please. For CAF2 and RDOF areas that have received full authorization, we'll consider these to be ineligible locations for grants unless the RDOF locations have been defaulted on or have missed their implementation deadlines. Next slide, please. Project priorities are highlighted here and cover items within the project technical and financial sections. These are all very important items to pay attention to when submitting the application. The geographic distribution item is a priority that KOBD will be using to ensure grant dollars are distributed fairly across Kansas and that all parts of Kansas have an opportunity to benefit from this program. Next slides will be presented by Rick and will focus on the middle mile program. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Josh. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the middle mile subprogram is to reduce middle mile transport costs and encourage transport expansion to support unserved and underserved areas across the state while promoting resiliency, all on an open access basis. Next slide, please. We'll fund it with a required 50% match for the selected project, with a total of up to $2 million being made available per project. The network must be able to support 10 gig synchronous speeds with 100 millisecond or less latency. In the event an end-to-end middle mile solution crosses the state line, funds will only be made available to the middle mile segment within Kansas. Next slide, please. In the infrastructure section, many of these were the same priority. The priorities that are not included in the infrastructure and line extension are cost savings. We'll look at cost of the program, cost of the project, throughput capacity, viability, and co-investment. As promised, we're going to take a break and answer some of the questions that have come in before wrapping up. Ben will present the questions and we'll do our best to answer. Next slide, please.
And at this time, I don't see any questions in the chat, but maybe we could pause just a moment and see if anyone wants to quickly type something into the chat for any questions up to this point, please.
I will also go ahead and allow folks to unmute themselves. So if you would like to come off mute and speak, you should be able to do so now.
And there is a question that's come through. I'll read it. It comes from Devin. If there are BSLs that are claimed as served on the latest BDC map with 120 serviced by a fixed wireless provider, but not a fiber or HFC provider, could these locations be eligible for last mile grant and or a line extension grant under Bag 6?
That's a great question, Devin. Generally speaking, since we are using the BDC map to help be the baseline of our determinations of what is eligible locations when what is not, assuming that that technology is meeting our eligible technology criterion, which includes licensed fixed wireless, licensed by rural fixed wireless, HFC fiber, and it is providing that service at 100/20, and that is available to that address, then it may not be eligible to be invested in with the Bag $6. But it's always dependent on very specific case scenarios and nuances. So always feel free to submit those questions to us directly if you have more information on it, and we're happy to help look at that location. But generally speaking, it needs to meet our eligible technology and that minimum speed requirement as provided on that fabric.
Hope that answered your question. Again, you can put your questions in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand to be unmuted, or if you're up, you can unmute as it is, but we'll wait a moment here. I don't see any hands up. Okay, and we have a question from George. And George, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, we're unmuted. We'll try this out. Hey, I don't want to slow us down, but I'm President CEO of Trilogy Networks. We provide private digital agriculture infrastructure, and so we don't apply, or we're not applicable for middle mile or last mile line extension. But when it came to co-investment and or advantaging any of the applicants that do apply, we were considering whether or not the state would look at the deployment of digital agriculture infrastructure as an advantage on an applicable application. So our gear is like a 5G, private 5G for extending industrial IoT into fields and things like that. So with that, if that makes any sense, I'll wait for your comments.
Thanks so much for your comment, George. We'll certainly take that into consideration. That's a very interesting perspective you have shared. That being said, for the purposes of the Bag 6 program, what you have shared does not seem to be eligible and for this particular program. But we'll certainly take that under advisement for future considerations as we continue to roll out future programs.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, at this time, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or hands raised.
Maybe we'll give it another couple seconds here, Ben. Just a FYI, you wouldn't have been able to unmute earlier, but you should have the ability, as George demonstrated, to be able to unmute now. So if you'd like to come off mute, you are welcome to do so to ask your question, or you can, of course, drop your question into the chat. If you would like to ask a question of us anonymously, because I know the chat shows your name, you can also utilize the Q&A function to anonymously ask your question, and we could also get that potentially answered and or on our FAQ document as well. With that being said, I have attempted to buy enough time for our attendees to ask their questions, so I think we are good to go ahead and pause questions for now. Continue to put them in the chat if you'd like. I'll go ahead and disable the function to unmute yourselves, and we'll go ahead and continue the slide deck. So Russell is now going to provide some guidance on the public comment part of the application process. So next slide, please.
Thanks, Ben and Joe. Next slide, please. What would a grant program be without a public comment process? We'll start with comments for the last mile and line extension programs. This is a great opportunity for all to review and provide feedback, whether it be in support or expressing concerns about the application. Public commenters will have categories to submit their feedback as seen in the slide. In the event that there are applications that overlap with service areas with projects underway, projects planned, or where broadband already exists, we'll use the application overlap process to resolve. More to follow on that process in a few slides. Next slide, please. For service areas with projects underway, we'll need to see proof that that work has indeed started. Items demonstrating proof are listed on this slide. These are the same proof standards as KOBD's prior programs, so nothing should be new there. If the challenger does not complete their work, there are penalties. Next slide, please. For applications that overlap with a commenter's project that are planned but not underway, we will need to see evidence that the planning phase has indeed started. Evidence such as maps, locations identified, and preliminary bill of materials, etc., are good examples. If the public comment is accepted, the challenger will be subject to completing the project within 18 months, given that another organization's application, or at least part of it, was hindered by the public comment. Next slide, please. Another only applicable to last mile and line extensions for service areas where broadband already exists. Challengers will use speed tests to challenge existing services. Speed test requirements are listed to be sure to include the 5 criteria, plus have at least 5% of the locations included. Note that consumer testimonials are no longer accepted. Next slide, please. Broadband availability checks are covered on this slide. We will be using the FCC's Broadband Data Collection Fabric tool and the underlying service availability information in the BAG program. We will also use other data in supplemental roles to help clarify service availability information where there may be questions around what broadband is actually available in service areas or locations. Next slide, please. The high-level approach to evaluating an application's impact to a community is shown on this slide. All data that is being requested and compared against is in a format that all service providers are using when submitting data into the BDC platform today. We are asking for the proposed service area data in a CSV file using version 7 of the BDC fabric. Everyone should be familiar with those templates and data standards. Once that data is provided by the applicant, we will then compare that against the BDC service availability data and the fabric to see the application's proposed service area and verify that all locations are unserved. Next slide, please. Other acceptable data is optional. We recognize that the BDC platform data is not perfect, but it is getting better as each day goes by. In the event that there is inaccurate or unvalidated service availability information still out there, we'll accept other forms of data to help sort out the true status of specific locations or location. The 3 areas are speed test, service availability data, and infrastructure data. I think most of us are familiar with these criteria. Next slide, please. The other category is a catch-all for any public comment that does not fit into the other 3 categories. Note that even though we've evaluated every comment in the other category, not one has impacted an application to date. Next slide, please. The public comment requirement for the middle mile program are slightly different than the other 2 programs. For areas where middle mile already exists, we'll need to see a lot of evidence so that a comparison can be made. We'll need to see existing and proposed pricing structures plus an example on why the current middle mile solution is sufficient. Additionally, we'll want to see the route maps for the compared solutions, feature sets, scalability, community served, or to be benefited. Next slide, please. For those that submit public comments, we want to ensure that everyone was aware of the public commenter's responsibilities. When a public comment is validated for a planned but not started or a construction underway project, that causes KOBD to redirect funding away from the proposed project service area. In essence, it prevents an application from moving forward, either in part or in full. To ensure that this application was legitimately paused, KOBD will require quarterly project updates on these projects until the project is complete. A no response to a quarterly update request will cause KOBD to assume that there is no program or it is not active. As a result, the ability to submit public comments and applications for other grant programs will be considered for suspension, starting from the first missed date. Next slide, please. The applicant response is an important step in the public comment process. It lets KOBD know that the applicant has reviewed the public comment and allows them to provide additional information to refute the challenger. If there is no applicant response, it does give credence to the challenger's assertions and forces KOBD to only use the public comment information to resolve the challenge. Next slide, please. Comments are submitted using our KDC grant portal. This is also where you'll find the application and all the reference materials. Marie is going to go through the application and compliance next. Next slide, please.
Sorry there for a moment. I forgot to take myself off mute. So thank you, Russ. We're going to start with the application. So next slide, please. Just as a reminder, we want to make sure applicants represent their information in the best possible light and are helping the application reviewers by providing the highest quality content to support the application. Here's a few tips that I'll call out to ensure everyone is putting their best foot forward. Make sure that you target the unserved areas. The unserved areas have a greater need to be connected. The economically distressed areas are a continued focus. There are tremendous economic benefits to enabling digital economy participation where there is none today. The end game is about driving adoption with the end user. Affordability and the associated pricing play a significant role in service adoption. Be sure to emphasize how the application deliverables align with the program priorities. Next slide, please. The weighting of the application for scoring based on the information submitted is 35% for the project proposal, 50% for the technical plan, and 15% for the financial information. Next slide, please. The weighting for middle mile is different than what we are using for the infrastructure programs. The key for this middle mile program is the project proposal and the technical plan. You need to clearly explain the justification, community, and overall benefits and savings, as well as the solution and future proofing of the proposed network. Next slide, please. There are occasions where submitted applications have overlapping proposed service areas. We have a process for that. We evaluate the applications on their own merit, if any overlapping service areas. The highest scoring application becomes the primary candidate. If there's a tie, the best solution is selected based on the overall benefit to the community. The lower scoring application is evaluated against the remaining applicant pool for funding. If the applicant agrees that the application remains viable after carving out the overlapping location IDs. Next slide, please. Some of the attestations in the application will look familiar to you because we've used them in prior programs. Of course, we require applicants to be in good financial standing with the state and that there's no pending litigation on previous Kansas-sponsored broadband projects. Additionally, we expect that the applicant is not presently disbarred, suspended, proposed for debarment, declared ineligible, or voluntarily excluded from participating in covered transactions by any federal department or agency. This also applies to the applicant's contractors. Next slide, please. Continuing with the attestations, the applicant must attest to have been operating in the state of Kansas for no fewer than 3 years and has not within a 3-year period preceding the proposal been convicted of or had a civil judgment rendered against them for the commission of a fraud or a criminal offense in connection with obtaining, attempting to obtain, or performing a public transaction or contract under a public transaction, or had violation of federal or state antitrust statutes or commission of embezzlement, theft, forgery, bribery, falsification, or destruction of records, making false statements, or receiving stolen property. Next slide, please. Additional attestations include that the applicant is not presently indicted criminally or civilly charged by a government entity, is not within a 3-year period preceding the application had one or more public transactions terminated for cause or default, or is participating in subsidy programs to optimize digital inclusivity. Next slide, please. Continuing on, we'll look at post-award compliance and accountability. Next slide, please. Similar to BAG 5 and our other programs, post-award compliance activities will include required monthly reports and a closeout report. Monthly reports will consist of a status update, budget expenditure report, and supporting information for expenditures as needed. Disbursements will be on a quarterly basis. Closeout reporting will involve validating the project and its capabilities, route segment completion and performance validation, final expenditure reporting, and documenting the highlights of the project. Next slide, please. If there's a material project change to your project once it has been started, the grantee must inform KOBB immediately and also provide an update on the monthly report prior to implementation. KOBD must review and approve changes to ensure the changes in compliance with program guidelines and is within the scope of the original application. Changes to the implementation plan without advance notification and approval may result in reduced budget and/or clawback actions. If there's any doubt about materiality of a change, please engage KOBD. Failure to engage KOBD to determine the materiality prior to changing or implementing the change may also result in a reduced budget and/or clawback actions. Expenditures incurred without prior approval may be deemed unallowable and will not be reimbursed. Next slide, please. So, what are material project changes? These can include deviations from the original fiber route, fiber segments being added or removed, and any fiber facilities placement extending outside the defined project area. Regarding the original count of locations, we're really focused on any removal of location IDs that were part of the original plan. Any incremental locations do not need to be approved. However, any removals need to be identified and reviewed. Changing the architecture will also require a review, given that grants were partially awarded based on the overall solution that was to be built. Electronics and manufacturer changes must be reviewed to ensure compliance with the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. Additionally, changing fiber placement approach, moving from buried to aerial, is also included. And last but not least, project variances greater than 10% of any budget category will need to be reviewed and approved in advance. That's our program, so I'll turn it over to Ben for our Q&A.
Very good, thank you. And as before, if you'd like to put a question into the chat, that's one way to do this. If you'd like to raise your hand, unmute, and vocalize your question, that would be fine as well. I think at this point there's nothing yet in our chat, no hands raised, but we will wait for a moment to see if anyone wants to chime in.
I will add, as folks contemplate their questions, that if you missed it in the announcement of this webinar and the Bag 6 program, there is also a live web page right now for Bag 6. And on that web page, you can find that our program guidelines are now up, as well as our rubrics are now up for your perusal. It's been up since the press release went out, I believe, Ben. So if you haven't gotten a chance to take a look at it, please go ahead and do so. But we have that live now for you to take a look at.
Yes, and I just dropped a link to that in the chat. Also in the chat is a question now from Kyle. If there are known BSLs that fall within existing grant areas, but due to new construction or a previous homeowner refusing a drop and now the new homeowner requesting a drop in service, would these BSLs and the drop costs be eligible as part of the line extension grant, as long as it was less than 5,280 feet?
That's a great question, Kyle. I may attempt to ask a clarifying question here. I think the question you're asking there, Kyle, is about the grant area. So you're probably thinking like polygons, like if you're trying to get through a line extension or otherwise to a BSL that is new or eligible, I should say, is for our locations, then can you get there even though it's crossing through an area? And I think the response to that, Kyle, if I am rephrasing it correctly, is yes, because we are trying to not put the focus on polygon grant area. We're really focused and lasering in on your location list that you're now providing to us. So if it is an eligible location and it is not, under any of the other circumstances that we've gone through today, an ineligible location, and it is within maybe somebody else's or your own area, so long as it's not on that location list and it is an eligible location, then yes, it should be eligible, because we're not trying to focus on area, right? We're focused on the BSLs that you're trying to get to, if that makes sense, Kyle. So hopefully I rephrased it correctly, and then hopefully that answers the question that you've asked there. But we're really focused on what BSL are you trying to go to?
Very good. And there's a question in the Q&A that I'm sorry I didn't have access to until just now, but I see a question saying, we are seeing an approximate 30% incorrect BSL location on the map. Will locations approved be checked to ensure they are actually a livable structure that is not served by another company? We have submitted over 800 challenges in the last 2 years and just started receiving some answers, but it doesn't appear they are actually checking, and they are not making an effort to correct.
That's a great question, Randy. And I know we've had back and forth, not just with you, Randy, but with others about this as well. It's tough, right? Because we try as much as our office can. We have a fantastic GIS analyst here in the office that tries as much as we can submit our own challenges to the FCC. I'm sure Stephen has a running total in his head of how many challenges we constantly submit to the FCC against their fabric, because it is not by any means a perfect map. With that being said, we have to start from some data set, right? And then use that as kind of the base of which our program starts off of. So like we had mentioned through this webinar, using the definitions as defined and the eligibilities as defined through this program, if it's on the FCC map and it is not one of the eligible technologies and served at that minimum speed, then it should be an eligible location to be served. If it is the alternative to that, where it is being served with that minimum speed and it's an eligible technology, then it likely would not be eligible for funding through our BAG program. I do encourage everyone to continue as much as they can to submit challenges to the FCC. We agree that the map is absolutely not perfect. We ourselves do our own challenges, but we have to continue to use the fabric to be the baseline of which we determine eligible locations. Hopefully that helps answer that question, Randy. And I think everyone here, if you're not familiar with how to submit those challenges to the FCC, feel free to reach out to us. We also have a mention of it in the program guidelines of how to submit that challenge to the FCC to correct an otherwise incorrect broadband availability information regarding a BSL. Okay.
Very good. Okay, well, there's another question or two here in the chat as well. Again, reminder, you can throw a question in the chat, Q&A, or you can raise your hand and unmute to vocalize a question. But this question is, Kate says, it looks like there can now be multiple users in the portal accessing the same application for the same company. Is she correct?
I'm going to look at Marie. Is that the case? I wasn't sure.
Unfortunately, no, Kate, that is not functionality that we have. That is on our wish list to get that fixed, but much as you've done with BEAD and prior BAG programs that were in our grant portal, only one person, the one that starts that application, will have access to it through their account. So again, the workaround for that for folks is that you would need to share your login information with those other individuals that you want to be able to go in and work in that application. I will also just say that we have made some internal changes to the portal. And so when you go into the application now, it is all one continuous document. There's no longer those multiple sections where one person could be working in one section and somebody else in a different section. Like I think before, one person could be maybe entering project information while somebody else was entering financial information or something like that. It's no longer like that. So it might be a little bit difficult to have multiple people working in there at the same time. I would probably be very careful about that if you're going to take that approach and be in it at the same exact time. There is now a save for later button in that you'll see when you log in and start an application. So I would just say that probably if you're going to have multiple people doing anything, that you're going to want to utilize that button pretty frequently so that you don't use or lose any information.
Very good. Okay. Excuse me. Going back to questions in the chat from Mark, are BEAD locations that were originally classified as served but are now eligible in Bag 6 available for the line extension grant?
I will attempt to take that. I guess I'm a little confused about that line of question because all of our BEAD awarded locations, all 26,000 of them, are not eligible for bag $6. We dropped from 50,000-ish, I think it was like 52,000 back in V4 bead list, to 26,000 when we had to adjudicate all of the locations that were considered unserved back then and change their status to serve based on the policy, the restructuring policy notes from NTIA. I'm not entirely sure there was scenarios in which we were turning served bead locations to unserved, and then making them eligible again. I guess I don't really understand the question mark. If you could maybe clarify that a little bit more. I guess I just don't recall in bead, and maybe I don't know if Steven's on here, if he could help refresh my memory. I just don't remember where we would have switched a bead location that was served and then turn it back to unserved, where we took it off of the bead list.
That situation. It's a situation where the location was classified as served per
okay.
It's classified. We're building past them,
Okay.
so we could not get, we could not include them because they weren't eligible because they were considered served.
I'm following you now.
According to this bag 6 map, they are eligible. But you did mention early on that the fiber had to be already in the ground. I was just wondering if we're going to build due to bead, and we're going to be passing these locations that are now bag 6 eligible, can they be submitted in a bag 6 line extension grant? Does that make sense?
I think I'm tracking better now, Mark. I think the bead location threw me off just a bit. So sorry for misunderstanding your question.
Oh, no.
That did help.
It's all very complicated.
Yes, it is, especially when they're overlapping like that. So yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, when the bead list was developed, there were served locations that were reported on the map at the time, so they didn't make it to the bead eligible list. But now we're on the current version of the fabric. Those locations are now eligible, but they didn't get onto the bead map because V4 was not as accurate, if one wants to say that, as it is on V7. So yes, if they are showing up as, and I think we have a likely eligible BSL list that we tried our best to use the current version of the fabric to determine, and then we use a little bit of the version 8 of the fabric to kind of take off some more non-BSLs that were showing up that may have been missed in V7, because we did have access to that information. But we did take what we had with the current versions of the fabrics and try to create a likely eligible list of locations that is on our webpage right now. So if those locations are not served anymore and they're currently unserved, and that's reflected on the map as unserved, then yes, it would absolutely be eligible for bag 6. And since you're asking specifically about the line extension grant part, so long as the infrastructure exists in which you can reach those locations with no more than a mile away, then it should be eligible for that line extension particular part of the grant. If that makes sense. That infrastructure does have to exist, though. It can't be like I want to put infrastructure here in the future, and that is how I'm justifying it's within 1 mile. You wouldn't be able to propose an application like, in the future I will have infrastructure here, and because it will in the future be here, I'm within that 1 mile. But currently, as of today, it's not there yet. So because it's not there yet, it would exceed that mile. So that wouldn't be allowable under this program. Hopefully that helps answer your question, Mark.
Very good. Okay. Well, there's a few more questions in the chat about RDOF. Regarding eligibility of RDOF areas, if an RDOF award winner has not defaulted or missed an implementation deadline, but they have not yet started construction in the RDOF area, would that RDOF area be eligible for bag 6 funding, subject to public comment adjudication?
Thank you, Ben. And actually, I see Devin and Kyle's question, both RDOF related, both related to eligibility of those RDOF locations. So if you don't mind, Ben, and Devin and Kyle, I'm going to actually attempt to answer both of your questions at the same time, because they lot of interplay and overlap there. So I think I can.
And if I
try
may,
to answer
sorry to
that.
interrupt, Joe, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would just want to voice the question from Kyle regarding certified RDOF areas available for award. Who is going to determine if those awardees are meeting their implementation deadlines, or what resources should we use to determine this?
And then I also see Kate Young's question is also related to RDOF. So why don't you go ahead and do that one too, and we'll bundle it up.
Yeah. So does the KOBD potential eligible location list include RDOF and CAF locations that are or could be eligible, or are RDOF and CAF locations not included, and that's up to the applicant to do that due diligence in addition to the KOBD location list?
Right. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Devin, Kyle, and Kate, for those questions. A lot of interest on RDOF and that mentioned here in our program. So I'm going to ask KOBD and the WIT team to be keeping an eye on me and keeping me honest here, and cut me off as soon as I start accidentally saying the wrong things here. I want to be very careful how I say this. So, yes. And what I mean by yes is RDOF locations and CAF locations that are not yet built as of today are on the likely eligible location list, if that is what we can see that they are still not built yet. So what we are saying by doing that, and also including in our program guidelines to which you can review, is that as this time, KOBD considers not yet built RDOF locations that have been awarded and CAF2 locations that have been awarded likely eligible for Bag 6. And you may apply for those as normal through the program guidelines. That being said, those RDOF applicants and CAF2 applicants that have yet to build those locations may challenge your application and prove that they will build it within, I believe we said 18 months. If they can show us documentation and therefore sharing in the public sphere that they will build those locations within 18 months and then provide all the rest of the associated documentation, there's a long list on our program guidelines, and I can't recall that extremely long list on the top of my mind. But within that 18-month period, along with all of those required documentation and supportive evidence, KOBD may review that and may potentially accept that evidence through public comment from that RDOF or CAF applicant and accept that to deny that application from progressing any further. If such public comment does not occur, or the public comment does not suffice to KOBD's review, then the application where the applicant submitted to potentially build these likely eligible RDOF and CAF2 awarded locations that have not yet been built, those may potentially move forward into final review, consideration, and potential award. I have to be very careful how I say that. So no one has cut me off yet. I'm still here, I think, in the meeting. So feel free, anyone else on KOB to chime in, but that is the intent with our program here as it relates to not yet built RDOF and CAF projects, CAF2 projects to be specific.
And Joe, those are included in the potential list of potential locations.
Yes, that is correct.
And a follow-up question here from Devin. Just to clarify, under a line extension project, can we extend our fiber network up to 1 mile and serve BSLs that are not currently served by a fiber or hybrid fiber coax provider, even if those BSLs are currently served by licensed fixed wireless?
If the licensed fixed wireless or licensed by rule fixed wireless is at the minimum 100/20, then that would likely not be an eligible location to be served under the line extension program. Because those fixed wireless technologies that I've mentioned are eligible technologies, and compounded with the fact that if they are providing that 100/20, then that would likely mean that that is not an eligible location for this program. Now, if they are not served at 100/20, let's say it's below that minimum and it is licensed or licensed by rule, then it would be potentially eligible for funding. And likewise, if it is over 100 over 20 megabytes per second, and it is unlicensed fixed wireless or mobile access or LEO, those technologies for the purposes of Bag 6 are not recognized to be eligible technologies, and therefore, even if they allege to be higher than 100 over 20, they would still be likely eligible for Bag 6. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, and then another follow-up there. The map claims they are served by 100 over 20, but we have many speed tests showing they are well under that speed. Is there any opportunity for us to challenge?
That is a
Yes.
fantastic question, Devin. And while I understand the need to want to challenge those, for the purposes of this Bag 6 program and for this, that will not exist. You will not be able to submit a speed test to challenge the validity of a location broadband availability through the map, the FCC map. There won't be a speed test component to our public comment process. No.
Okay, well, it does appear that for the moment we are caught up on questions. I don't see any additional hands or questions in the chat.
We'll certainly take it into consideration for future programs. Any other questions? You also have the ability to unmute. I also accidentally turned on your ability to turn on your camera. So if you want to do that too, you're welcome to do so. But I did enable everyone's ability to unmute as well. So you can come off unmute, raise your hand, drop a question in the meeting chat, or let me double check the Q&A here real quick too, Ben, but I don't see anything else. Again, just to redirect everyone to our website for further resources, we have our program guidelines now available for you to read and digest and ask questions of. We have our 3 scoring rubrics that are now live that you may review. We have the scoring rubric for last mile, line extension, and middle mile program. We also have templates that are now available that you can go ahead and start working on your applications and using those templates. If you need to navigate Salesforce, we have a user guide, as well as you can, of course, reach out to us. I love Kate's question about the multiple users. I agree with Marie. It's a wishful thinking and on our wish list. It's just a limitation that currently our Salesforce portal just doesn't support. And while we cannot in good faith recommend sharing passwords, it absolutely is a workaround that works. But yes, please refer yourself to our webpage for more information about the Bag 6 program. And also, if you have any questions, please submit it to us at kdc_broadband@ks.gov. Typically, that's monitored by multiple people on our team. So if you send me an email, I try really hard to be as responsive throughout all hours of the day and weekend, but sometimes I may not be as fast as I would like to be. If you need a faster response, you may have a lot better luck emailing that email address, the broadband inbox. And we will be putting all the questions that have been asked here, including the ones verbally spoken, and any questions you submit to us onto a live FAQ document that everyone can keep up with, so that everyone's getting the responses at the same time as we continue to answer questions through this application period. So please feel free to reach out to us, give us a call, send an email to the kdc_broadband@ks.gov inbox. Either cases, questions asked will be put on that FAQ doc and then put on our website for people to be able to see the answers to those questions. I think I have bought plenty of time for people to submit their final questions, seeing nothing else and wanting everyone to be able to go back to their schedules now. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to our executive director to close us out. And just from our team and myself, thank you so much for being on our webinar. Bill, back to you.
Well, thanks, Joe. Thanks, KLB team. And thank you, all of our participants in our Bag 6 webinar today. We're looking forward to tomorrow's permitting workshop here in beautiful downtown Hayes. For those of you who are coming, please safe travels, and we'll see you here. Thanks, guys, and have a great rest of your day.